Kia ora, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, e nā raurangatira mā nau mai haere mai whakatau mai I tēnei hui mariko. Ko Barry Coatsahou, ko te kārahi o te putea whaikakaro. Reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Tihe Māori ora. So a very warm welcome to you all. I'm Barry Coates, I'm CEO of Mindful Money. And this is a third seminar in our third series, and it's our last one for 2022. So we will resume seminars on the 18th of January. So we're hoping you're all going to come back then after a great break. So last week we talked about climate change. We talked about how your investment can make a difference in terms of reducing emissions in your KiwiSaver or your investment portfolio. I thought it was a really interesting look into what you can do to reduce your emissions and the different strategies that can be used by investment providers. So please check that out on our website. It's a very watchable, I think, very good seminar. Maybe I'm biased, but I think it's really great. So to the frank warning, before we start on this week's discussion, I should let you know that we're talking about some specific companies and fund providers during the seminar. The seminar is about investment strategies and is not financial advice or an invitation to invest in any particular individual company or any particular fund. So the aim of this week's seminar is to explain how fund managers can manage your KiwiSaver or your investment fund in order to influence the fund that they're investing in. And that's important because increasingly that influence, as we will hear, is used to promote social and environmental issues that are both important, climate change, for sustainability, for biodiversity loss, etc. But they're also important in terms of investors, as we know from annual surveys. So, this whole area we're going to call engagement or stewardship or active ownership, number of different terms for it. But it's important that we understand this because for many investors, the challenge is not only avoiding the companies you don't like or that don't align with your values, it's actually to influence all of the companies because in a way, you're an owner of the company when you buy their shares and the fund managers are acting on your behalf. So in a way, active ownership is actually more like an obligation to make corporate governance work. So let's crack on. I'd like to start by extending a very warm welcome to our first panelist, George Wayman. George is manager of ESG, environment, social and governance issues at Harbour Asset Management. He's involved in a number of initiatives around sustainable finance, including he was a key member of the steering group for the development and launch of New Zealand's Stewardship Code. And we'll discuss that later on in the seminar. So Harbour Asset Management is kind of a good organisation to have on the seminar because they're known for their expertise on engagement and stewardship. And they won the Mindful Money Award for ethical investment in 2021, and they're runners-up earlier on this year. So welcome, George. Can we start off with a short introduction to Harbour and to the work that you do?
Sure, thanks Barry, and kia ora all. So Harbour is a Wellington headquartered manager of investment funds, established back in 2010. and we manage around $7 billion in assets for a variety of different clients, from large institutions, charitable organizations, iwi, and your typical mums and dads investors. We offer several equity, bond, and multi-asset fund options that cater to different investment objectives and risk tolerances. So, for example, we've got high growth active equity funds through to more conservative cash and passive funds. And responsible investing and embedding sustainability information into our investment decisions has always been a core part of our approach, which applies to varying degrees across all our investment funds.
Cool. George, engagement with companies that you invest in is obviously one of the key strategies for Harbour. Can you describe how you decide which companies to engage in, how you collect data and can analyze those companies, and what your approach is to engagement?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, being an active owner and engaging with companies has always been central to our overall responsible investing strategy, because we believe that is the best way that you can create positive change and influence behavior for the better. And so this really just comes down to sitting down and having conversations with companies, with people that range from investor relations, sustainability staff, through to senior management and the board as well. And more widely, it also involves talking with policymakers, regulators, and the wider investment industry as well. And so we really engage with companies for a variety of reasons, both in a systematic way and then also reactively if an issue arises. So our systematic engagement takes place during our annual sustainability survey process. So that's where we collect data across our whole New Zealand investment universe, which is around 60 companies. And that's our primary way of really assessing and ranking these companies based on their sustainability performance. So yeah, I mean, the survey is quite comprehensive, with over 80 different environmental, social, and governance metrics, from carbon emissions, health and safety performance, board independence, etc., which really gives us a good holistic view of how companies are managing these issues. And so, yeah, with these surveys, we try and collect what we can, but it does involve engaging with the companies to really find where some of those gaps are.
That's interesting, George. So you couldn't really do that strategy if you were invested in 5,000 securities, as some investment companies are. So you have a more concentrated portfolio that allows you to do that more intensive data gathering and engagement.
That's right. So, I mean, most of our funds are primarily limited to the New Zealand and Australian markets. So that enables us to have a better picture and engage with companies more closely where we already have those relationships.
Cool. Thank you, George. I'd now like to introduce Francis Blundell. Francis is the Chief Officer of Legal and ESG Issues at KMD Brands. ESG is, of course, environment, social, and governance issues. Francis became part of KMD when it was formed from the merging of iconic brands, Kathmandu, Rip Curl, and Oboz. And as a kind of a point of congratulations, KMD recently won, as in this week, or was it last week, for the second time, the Most Sustainable Business Award for the Deloitte Top 200 New Zealand Companies. So congratulations and warm welcome, Francis.
Thanks, Barry. It's great to be joining the discussion today. Yes, very excited to have that end of last week, the Deloitte Top 200 Awards. So it's Sustainable Business Leadership. So it's something that we are really proud to be recognised for. So KMD Brands is a global company, lifestyle, outdoor sports, consisting of 3 brands: Kathmandu, Rip Curl, and our footwear brand Oboz, out of the US. So started as Kathmandu Holdings the group's been listed on the NZX and ASX since 2009, and we renamed to KMD Brands earlier this year to reflect the transformation that's taken place within the group since 2018 with that initial Oboz acquisition and then Rip Curl in 2019. So I'm the Chief Legal and ESG Officer, and I'm also the Company Secretary.
Cool. Francis, Kathmandu and KMD more generally have obviously had recognition like that award for your sustainability work. What are some current issues that you're prioritising on sustainability?
Yes, the purpose of KMD Brands as a group is inspiring people to explore and love the outdoors. So our connection and our love for the outdoors is what all our brands are built on, and all our brands are dedicated to supporting and encouraging people to get outside into the communities and explore the places around them. Because of that, we're very aware of our responsibility to protect and preserve our natural environments and the communities where we impact. And through that, we've refined our group strategy, and leading in ESG is one of the four key pillars of our group strategy. And we've formed our strategy following a materiality assessment process where we've asked a wide range of stakeholders about the issues that matter most to our group of brands, both as a business and from a sustainability perspective. And those results have informed our ESG strategy for the next 3 to 5 years. So through that process, we have 3 key focus areas. The first being our people in our communities, and this is about our employees and the workers in our supply chain and the communities our brands impact. Our second focus area is science-based climate action and how we progress towards a low carbon future in line with those global goals. And our third focus area is circularity, and this is about establishing systems to move away from the linear take, make, waste model and finding ways to keep resources in use. So our strategy is focused around these key 3 areas, and then we've set a number of goals within each area.
Oh, I'm sure those goals would resonate with much of the audience because they are very topical and key challenges for companies today. Let's bring George back, and this is kind of a little bit of a unique occasion where we can have both sides of the engagement between an investor and a company. So, Francis, can you kick us off and kind of describe your shareholding base? You know, who invests in KMD Brands, and what are your relationships with those companies and individuals who invest? Do many of them contact you? Do they ask you about social environmental issues? What kind of things do they raise?
So we have across Australia and New Zealand and rest of world over 11,000 shareholders. Around 65% of shares are actually held by the top 20, and engagement comes mostly from that top 20, the managed funds and brokers. A lot of that engagement is scheduled around our half and full year results release, as well as annual roadshow events, which are scheduled outside of that time. So it's a formalised sort of process of regular engagement. We also have a communication channel through our KMD Brands investor website where we receive ad hoc requests from time to time. There's also relationships, obviously the CEO and CFO get contacted by key shareholders ad hoc all the time with just questions. Obviously some are appropriate to engage and discuss with if it's not market sensitive information, but obviously there's a level of information that simply you can't talk about unless you're talking about it openly to everybody at the same time and in line with continuous disclosure obligations. Our annual shareholders meeting also took place last in November, and that's the opportunity for questions to be put directly to the board of directors rather than just management, though management's available as well. So there's lots of opportunities for our shareholders to engage with us. In terms of the issues that get raised, there's always a number, obviously, around financial performance, particularly in the last few years, as we've been heavily impacted with COVID closures and supply chain challenges, like all other businesses. But at our last annual shareholders meeting, as an example, we had questions also around gender diversity, responsible material fibres and what we're doing in that space, electric vehicles, as well as directors' fees. So engagement comes in many forms, and the questions are varied and can cover a broad range of topics.
And have you seen a change over time? Have you seen, because you've been company secretary for Kathmandu as well as KMD Brands, have you seen changes in those kind of investor concerns? For most people, I guess they would they've seen in the past primarily short-term financial returns have been of most interest to those 20 top investors. But you're now seeing a change in that, are you?
Absolutely, a growing increase in ESG related questions, which obviously covers everything that's not financial, but a lot of interest in the wider dynamic of the business in terms of those efforts in relation to climate change. Partly we're saying this is important to us and this is part of our strategy. So we are asking for engagement on these topics because we want our shareholders to hold us to account for delivering in these areas. They're really keen to understand what we're doing. But I felt that even this year's annual meeting, there was a lot more engagement on the sort of non-financial metrics and what are we doing in the space than has come up previously in the past, was more around business operating sort of strategy.
So, George, from your perspective as a fund manager and investor in KMD, can you describe the kinds of issues that you would bring to KMD, the sort of things you'd be interested in engaging with them on?
Yeah, sure. So I guess start of this year, we started a kind of strategic engagement focused on kind of impact and linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. So that really formed part of our extended due diligence process that we run for investment candidates in our new Sustainable Impact Fund. And so, yeah, we just wanted to learn more about the real world impacts that KMD was having on the environment, and then if possible try and link those to those goals, which is no easy task given the framework isn't specifically designed for an investment context and can apply more so to policymakers. But nevertheless, we wanted to try zero in on where the company was making positive impact and come up with the right measures to track that performance over time.
And can you describe a bit more about how you ran that process of engagement? Was it between meetings? Was it with Frances and kind of members of her team, or was it with the board? How did that happen?
Yeah, so it initially started out by just on an ad hoc basis, reaching out to Frances along with my colleague who covers KMD, Irvin Reimer. And so that kind of kicked off the initial discussion, but we set up multiple kind of meetings after that with some of her colleagues, particularly around issues on modern slavery, where we talked to her colleague who's their social impact manager, as well as when it came to product circularity, getting put in touch with their head of product innovation and sustainability. So yeah, it really ran through multiple people and multiple interactions, which really gave us a better idea on some of those specific issues.
And Frances, for you, how important was this process? I mean, was it a distraction from what you normally do, or was it something that you were interested in and found benefit from for KMD?
I definitely found benefit from it. it's a welcome conversation, and it was quite useful process for us to just in terms of self-examination, I would say. So the conversation really started when I was brought in by our CFO, who has the existing relationship with Harbour in terms of that regular engagement level and around financial results, and then as my role in leading the ESG function to discuss the context of our business and how a consumer discretionary company could fit within this sustainable impact fund. So although the engagement was ongoing over a number of months and there were a series of discussions and emails and material, it was at I would say the pace, it wasn't driven by a deadline that put us under pressure. It was just scheduling the timing when it made sense, and that certainly helped in terms of making sure that it worked for both sides. So I think that would be an important piece to keep in mind of having a cadence that allowed proper conversation and response, and bringing in the right stakeholders to be part of the conversation. So this enabled us to discuss in depth the approach of our social impact strategy, for example, bringing in the social impact manager to provide greater context about the work we are doing, and again in the circularity space, getting the subject matter expert involved, demonstrating the work that we've done in being involved in global industry groups and actually leading the development of some of the key standards. It provided us the opportunity to showcase the depth of knowledge and expertise that we have within the group, and enabled a dialogue to understand the information that was actually meaningful and important to an investor to understand, but which perhaps we've not been the best at showcasing. So that was a helpful learning to us to go, how can we better communicate this so that we are telling everyone about what we are doing. And it also highlighted the importance of consistent and tangible data to track progress over time, especially on those social and environmental outcomes, so that we can describe how the impact is made in tracking projects. So this, again, a learning for us to highlight the information we need to better report on.
Great, and Francis, there's a question coming on the Q&A about circularity, and in a way, is your approach to the circular economy reflecting that you perceive to be particular problems in the trade-off between environmental impact and maybe Kathmandu's sales objectives and cost objectives?
Look, it is
tricky. Are you responding to specific issues, or is it generally a kind of more like
industry-wide issue? I think that it's acknowledged that we're a consumer discretionary business. We're in the business of making products, but how do we do that in the most responsible way? People still need. They do need products to help enable them to live and explore and connect and get outside and live a healthy life and connect and do all those things that are important for our well-being. But how do we do that in a responsible way, as responsibly as we possibly can, while still needing to run a profitable business? Because we're not here unless we are generating profit. So certainly, we are. That's still fundamentally an important part of what we do, but it's about balance. It's about generating a profit while making a positive impact rather than a negative one. So we're just looking at ways that we can implement those models wherever possible. We've got a recycling program on the Rip Curl side for wetsuit take back. So we take back any surf branded wetsuits, and they are recycled through TerraCycle. The Kathmandu side of the business, we have a model that's going to launch next year for apparel refurbishment and resale. So we're looking at opportunities to build these into our business that still obviously are supporting the business, but at the same time are looking at how we can best repurpose the resources that are already in use.
Cool. George, I've got a sort of follow-up for you on that, in a way, your initiative around finding out more about impact from KMD brands.
Yep.
In the past, the role of an ESG manager like yourself would have been to manage financial risk, to make sure that the value of the company isn't kind of adversely affected by environmental issues, so on. Won't get sued, reputational loss, etc. But it sounds like you're now more interested, or your attention is turning much more to the positive impacts that companies are making. Are you seeing that as a change to Harbour's approach as an investment manager? Is this a kind of a broader approach going on?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it really materialized in the launch of our kind of new sustainable impact fund, which just reflected, I think, what the market is really wanting in a new product, is to not only focus on the financial side and in ESG, but on that greater sort of focus on delivering positive impacts and talking about, I guess, double materiality, which is not just the financial materiality of ESG issues on your business, but also the impact that your business is having on the environment and society. So, yeah, there's always a debate on the definitions and the criteria and what is impact, but we wanted to really create a product that it's investing and aligned with companies that are producing some of those positive real world impacts.
And is that flowing through to all of your investment funds, or is it a particular approach for a niche fund?
Yeah, I mean, so the specific investment objective of that fund is kind of dual to deliver both a positive return to investors as well as positive impact as defined by the Sustainable Development Goal framework. But it's increasingly, I guess, influencing the rest of our funds and their ESG approach, because some of the intensive due diligence that we do on companies really kind of flows through and informing our view on, you know, the companies we're including in other funds as well. So yeah, there's definitely benefits that flow through to other funds.
So Francis, it sounds like as other funds are also kind of moving into this area of wanting to know more about impact, this engagement with Harbour will be helpful for you in being able to articulate that impact from KMD?
Yes, I think that you know, really that what this process sort of helps us do is sense check what we're doing and provide input about whether there's anything missing from our strategy and whether the metrics we're planning to measure make sense, and do they provide a meaningful demonstration of our progress, with our aim being to be transparent and accountable. It helps to provide that input about whether our strategy is hitting the mark.
Cool. Just a message to those who are live. Feel free to put a question into the Ask a Question function, and we'll come back to it to answer your question. To kind of step back a little bit from the engagement that both of you have, can you maybe help us understand a little bit more of what are some good practices and bad practices around engagement? And maybe coming to you first, George, what do you do when a company doesn't listen, or when a company is unwilling to change their basic business, or, you know, what's your escalation path? What happens in those circumstances? Because obviously it's not always the situation where Kathmandu's being open and finds a mutual benefit around these issues.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time in our experience, engagements with companies are quite positive and constructive, and I think that somewhat comes down to, I guess, our style and not trying to act as too much of an activist and outing companies in public or filing shareholder resolutions, for example. But yeah, there are, I guess, rare situations where talking with the companies might not work because they might not have the resource available, or they might disagree with you on an issue. So in those cases, I guess there are a few different tools we can use as escalation options. So I guess, and it does, I guess, depend on the severity of the issue that you're discussing. So in less serious instances, it might just be down to, I guess, marking them down on an ESG scorecard like the one that we have. But if it's quite a severe issue that we really disagree with and the company isn't really listening or hearing us out, then, we can take more intensive steps like voting against the chair at the AGM, or in extreme scenarios also divesting from the company completely. So it really does depend on the circumstance, but we've used all of these tools in the past before.
Yeah. And there's a question come in for you, George, around you obviously do a lot of your data collection and find out about companies through direct surveying and direct analysis, but there's lots of other measures around, like it was cited in the question, the Dow Sustainability Index. Do you see, kind of based on the fact that you've got more detailed information probably than the Dow Index is able to collect, do you see a lot of greenwashing or misinformed opinion or analysis of these issues in the public domain?
Well, I think one of the problems is that there have been studies out there that it kind of compares scores and ratings from different external ESG data providers out there, showing that there isn't really a strong relationship at all between them. So it can be quite difficult, and your results will kind of vary based on which one you choose. So they all come with their own methodologies and ways of kind of ranking the materiality of the issues. So I guess it comes down to finding one that you kind of agree with. But for us personally, having our own assessment framework is quite useful, given we are quite close to the companies that we invest in New Zealand, and some of these data providers are global in nature and don't necessarily engage with the companies directly to get the best view. So I suppose there are just pros and cons to using those providers out there. But having said that, we do utilize a couple like MSCI and ISS ESG ourselves, particularly when it comes to looking at Australian companies in our investment universe, and also for some of the specialist screening and climate services that they provide.
Cool. Francis, to you, can you sort of be a little bit, how should I say, intemperate, and tell us about some good and bad practices from investors, come present, company excluded. Feel free to be slightly critical of your investors where you think that sometimes they're not being very helpful.
Oh, it can be a difficult space. On the positive side, I had engagement in forming our ESG strategy with some of our ESG focused investors. Harbour was one of them, but there was others as well, to really get input on the strategy as I formed it. So, that was really helpful and positive to me, because it gave me confidence in what I was putting forward. So having that ability to sort of have that conversation and test what I was proposing in terms of these are the areas that we're focusing on. From an ESG perspective, I found it really helpful to be able to have engagement from investors who understand the issues that are top of mind, and to make sure that we are addressing in the right way. It helps to validate the strategic direction that we're taking. Engagement can come in various different forms. Obviously, there's plenty of it usually around annual meeting time, depending on the resolutions proposed. It can be challenging to have the conversations needed sometimes. Some investors will have a particular set of criteria that they have to work within, and as much as you try and describe the situation for your business, the policy will require them to make a decision in a particular way. We try and engage and have the conversations, provide the information we can without obviously anything that's sensitive that we're not able to share. There's obviously a lot of rules around what we can talk about, which is correct, but it can make it difficult to provide enough information to perhaps convince someone of a particular point of view. I would say every question, even when not particularly well informed, at least provides an opportunity to understand how we can do better next time, how we can better communicate on a particular issue, provide better information, whether through our reporting, our investor website, or other channels. So yes, sometimes you think they just don't understand our business. So why? What do we need to tell them and explain and help them feel better informed? And that's really where we've tried to address through our integrated reporting this year, in terms of producing a report that's really about our whole of business strategy, and really integrating financial and ESG reporting together into one source of truth that hopefully is a good reference point for all investors about our business, about what we're doing, about the issues we're facing, and how we're addressing them.
Have you had hostile resolutions filed against KMD or Kathmandu?
Not that I can think of that we've had plenty of debate leading up to some of the resolutions that just comes, particularly when you come to things like remuneration. Yep. But again, it's just a topic where people want a lot of disclosure and a lot of transparency, and just understanding how we can make sure we're providing that information.
Yeah, yeah. So just a final question on this before we move to the new Stewardship Code. From your example, would it be fair to say that most of your engagement from shareholders, Francis, is more helping you move in the direction that you're looking to move in, rather than changing your mind to do something that you would otherwise not be doing? Is that a fair assessment?
I think that is, in that it's usually about shareholders wanting to understand what we're planning, what's the strategy, what are we seeing on the horizon, rather than, we know our business best and have a clear path of where we're going to go. So it's not that a shareholder would come along and say, we think you should do business in such and such a location, and we'll think, oh great, we hadn't thought of that. So it doesn't really bring ideas to the table we weren't considering. It's more validating the plan, or perhaps leaving a level of caution around a decision.
Yeah. And from your perspective, George, aside from KMD Brands, where obviously this isn't an issue, but have you found occasions where you have changed a company's approach or kind of their policies when possibly they have initially not wanted that to happen?
Yeah, so like Francis said, it's most engagement is just about learning more, but there have been situations like a couple of years ago with A2 Milk. So they were considering an acquisition of quite an emissions intensive asset. And so, we spoke to the CEO and expressing our views on how, the company should take into account environmental considerations when considering, these types of acquisitions, and how it is quite important for us and other like-minded investors when it comes to our climate strategies. And so even though the company ended up still acquiring the asset, shortly afterwards, they did actually announce an initiative to fully electrify those operations by converting the coal-fired boilers into fully electric ones. So yeah, we saw that as quite a positive outcome. I mean, we can't completely attribute that to our engagement, but we feel like we did have some influence in kind of expressing our views as an investor at the time.
Cool, thank you. That's a great example. Hey, George, can you lead us through the New Zealand Stewardship Code, because you were kind of pretty centrally involved in the development of the code, and it's new and potentially it's significant for New Zealand investors and for the average person who has a KiwiSaver fund or an investment fund. Can you run
Yeah,
through kind of a little bit about where it came from and what's it for?
sure. So I guess to date, there wasn't really a stewardship code that existed in New Zealand compared to other countries like the UK or Singapore. So it really started out as a recommendation out of the Sustainable Finance Forum's roadmap for action and moving towards a more sustainable economy. And so the Centre for Sustainable Finance was really established as the implementation group to bring some of these key action items to life. And one of those was the development of a stewardship code. So it was an industry-led initiative from people across the responsible investment industry that kind of came together, and each representative contributed to the development of this code, which is essentially a set of principles guiding what best practice looks like when it comes to engaging with companies and being active owners.
Cool. And can you give us a flavor of how it's going to be used? And so there are some initial signatories, aren't there? And they're the ones who are kind of putting up their hands to kind of, in a way, take a bit of a leadership role in the code. I think Hub is one of those.
Yeah, that's right. So I think from memory, there are 7 founding signatories to date. And so we really want to encourage as many people to sign on as possible. Um, it is a code that's on a comply or explain basis. So that does have requirements, defining what best practices according to that. And um, there is an annual reporting process to comply with that. But really, yeah, it's just about being transparent about what your process is around engagement, being clear about what the outcomes are, and publishing those records and giving examples of your discussions with companies. So I think it's a great way to structure your approach and your policies and reporting, and hopefully combat greenwashing by being just more transparent and having a kind of agreed framework that each signatory can kind of measure themselves against.
So generally, what the public will see is kind of more of the funds divulging how they vote at AGMs on ESG issues, seeing more stewardship reports being prepared, and as you say, maybe some examples of where those engagements can have positive outcomes. Is that the
Yeah,
kind of thing that we can expect?
that's right. And it gives the code gives plenty of guidance and what can form some of those reports, but at the same time it is principles based, so it does allow some flexibility in the way you want to go about that. But yeah, the overall goal is better transparency across those areas that you noted.
And so the public will see kind of who signed up to the code. Will there be a complaints mechanism or anything where the public can say, gee, I'm not sure that this kind of stewardship practice is really being undertaken in the way it should?
Yeah, well, there's going to be a governance type body that will be set up that will really be responsible for that kind of monitoring and oversight. So it hasn't yet been established, but it's definitely going to be coming soon. And I'm sure part of that process is setting up a way of people coming and complaining if they find any issues that they don't seem to be in conformance with the code.
Good. It'll be good to see some of those stewardship reports come out. Obviously, Harbour's one of the ones who does the stewardship report already, and I know a few other leading funds do. But it'll be good to see that practice become a little bit more standard across the investment sector, hopefully.
Yeah.
So that's it. We've run out of time. Thank you very much to both of you. Really enjoyed the discussion, and congratulations, Francis, on your work at KMD Brands, and again for your kind of various recognitions that you get for that, and congratulations to you, George, for Harbour's work.
Thanks, Gary.
And thank you very much for
Thanks.
joining us.
Thank you.
So just to conclude, this is, as I said, the last one before you all go off and eat too much and get sunburnt and have a wonderful summer. I did want to thank our sponsors for this seminar series. Without them, it's not possible for us to do that. So thank you very much to our generous sponsors, and you can see them on the screen. So our most recent sponsor is Alfinity, who's just come on board, a new fund provider in New Zealand. MAS is the Medical Assurance Society, Mercer, New Zealand Green Investment Finance, and several sponsors, Chapman Tripp, Harbour Asset Management. As you see, George is ESG manager for them, Booster, and trustees, executors. And we also have two other bronze sponsors. So thank you very much to them as well. That's it from us. While we take a well-deserved Christmas and New Year break, and we will see you in the new year. Hopefully, have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. Mā te wā.